today panel here to talk about how to build a mature analytics workflow, and particularly using the Analytics Development Lifecycle. Before we jump into things, we do have a few housekeeping items that we want to cover. First, there will be a Q&A session at the end of this. So after we talk to our amazing panelists, we'll open things up in the chats to be able to answer some of your burning questions. If you are using the chat, there is a chat tab that's reserved for banter and really connecting with other people. We will be sending the recording out within 24 hours after this event, and also there will be a gold button that you can press afterwards to not only get a one-on-one demo of DBT Cloud, but also to fill out a survey, give us some feedback, let us know what was valuable, what you really liked about the session, so we can continue producing some great content and continue to share these insights and frameworks with you. So before I really get into the meat of things, I really want to take some time, make some introductions with the rest of our panelists. Starting with myself, I'm Alex Welch. I am the Director of Data here at DBT Labs. Been here for about 13 months now, and am really excited to be part of this movement with ADLC and everything that's going on here. And then I'm going to pass it on over to Tristan really quickly.
And Alex, you missed one thing. You were a contributor to the original ADLC white paper, so thank you for reading early edits to that.
My absolute pleasure.
Hi, everybody. Tristan Handy, founder and CEO of DBT Labs.
On to Srini.
Hi, everybody. My name is Srini Vemuru. I'm a Senior Director of Data Platforms and Data Engineering at Salesforce. I'm with Salesforce close to 13 years now, so in various different roles. So currently, my team owns data platforms, which are mainly responsible for moving into the modern data stack using DBT and other the modern data stack tools. And I also have a data engineering team close to 9+ Scrum teams who actually use DBT end-to-end on a daily basis. So pleasure to be part of this, and thanks for the opportunity, Tristan and Alex.
Absolutely. And Brian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Lloyd Newberry. I lead architecture for the Cox Automotive data portfolio, and we bring together data from across Cox Automotive in the industry to create things like Kelley Blue Book valuations in the auction space, all kinds of consumer insights that power websites that you might have heard of, like AutoTrader, Kelley Blue Book, and dealer websites, and all kinds of other tools in that space. I've been with Cox Automotive about 15 years. And for the last 10, I've been focused in data and establishing our cloud data platform and bringing that platform together with a small but mighty group of practitioners.
Awesome. Really excited to have you guys here today, and thank you for spending the time with us to talk about this. I can't tell you how excited I am to actually dive in here. So before we actually dive into the questions, we wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about the ADLC just in general, really set the framework and the context for the conversation, and kind of spend some time walking through why it's important and the value that it brings here. So when we look at the state of analytics today, we find we're at a really interesting inflection point. Many organizations have invested heavily in various data technologies, but they're still really struggling with really realizing that full value of those investments. And that's why and where the ADLC really fits in. It's a framework that we and you can use to actually navigate these types of challenges. Let me start by why this matters. In our recent research at DBT Labs, we found that many organizations continue to face incredibly significant challenges with their getting the value out of their analytics stack. The number one challenge being poor data quality. It's something that's been around since data existed, and it is one of the hardest things to really tackle. So it's no surprise that that's number one. But then you go into poor stakeholder literacy, integration challenges, and ambiguous ownership. All four of those comprise kind of like the core challenges that organizations are facing today. But you also, and like very notably, see some more basic tasks show up in these surveys. Things like building transformations means remain to be considerable challenges for many teams. And so if you're experiencing these three challenges, they actually lead to three really critical business impacts. The first is it really impairs your trust in the data. And when the data is questionable, decisions will get delayed. If you have to continually interrogate a number until you really, and because you don't trust it, your decision on that metric will continue to get pushed off. Secondly, slow decision-making velocity. It's without a clear process and without clear steps about where you should go and how you should be looking at things, everything just takes longer. And then thirdly, you have lower quality decisions. So when the data quality is unreliable and you make a decision on that bad data, it has wide sweeping ramifications there. And so what I find really fascinating about this is that none of these are truly a technology problem. They're actually a process problem here. And so, and we know this because despite having access to amazing tools, especially in the more recent times of LLMs and the technologies like that, organizations are still struggling with these fundamental workflow challenges here. So this is where the ADLC comes in. So the ADLC, it's been designed as an integrated workflow, and it looks like an infinity loop, very intentionally, because it really brings together the technical and the operational aspects of analytics. And not only that, it represents the fact that these are a continuous flow. And without conjoining them and continuing to iterate, you'll find yourself stuck. And so starting with just like a really quick overview of each of these components, it really starts with plan, right? This is where we define our requirements, we really align on business needs, and we design our approach to solving these problems with our technology and our data. Then we move on to develop, where we're building a solution, writing code, creating the products themselves. But then we want to be able to test them in a very robust way to gain that confidence before we actually and ultimately deploy them into production. That's kind of the data component of this. Then we move into the operations. This starts with operate. You know, how do you run and maintain your analytics products once they're out there in production? Then once you have that there, we can move on to observability. You know, you have to monitor the performance, you have to track the utilization, and you have to ensure that it's reliable. Treat it like a true product there. And then you get into discover. Even if you build the best data product tool out there, if your consumers cannot find it, it's not going to produce the value that you initially wanted it to. And then finally, we get to analyze, the part that everybody knows and loves about data and driving those insights. It's really interesting to find that, you know, this is just one component of a much broader and comprehensive lifecycle that I think is, you know, each component is equally important as analyze, right? So the other really important thing to know here is that this isn't a one-way street. It's a continuous cycle of improvement. And just like teams do with software development, this is an iterative cycle where we're constantly learning and improving on our systems here. One of the most transformative aspects of the ADLC is how it brings together different stakeholders. Across the organization, we see three main personas. We have the engineer, someone who creates usable, reusable data assets and builds that foundation so that the analysts who are actually performing the analysis can get to the insights they need and drive that value, and then turn that over to the decision maker who's actually taking those insights and making them actionable and driving the business value off of them. But really, here's the key insight that makes the ADLC different. Right? These aren't rigid roles. We really like to think about these in terms of hats as opposed to badges. And the reason we think about it that way is any one of these three personas can take off that hat at any given time and put on another. For example, an analyst might put on an engineer's hat to go use DBT to modify a data pipeline. Or a decision maker might want to put on their analyst hat to dive in a little bit deeper to have that little bit more nuanced understanding of a metric. And this flexibility that is built into here is really crucial for removing those bottlenecks and really accelerating your analytics work here. And really at its core, it's about enabling people to do their best work and not at all about really constraining them to their role in the organizational hierarchy here. So when organizations adopt the ADLC framework, they typically see some key benefits here. One, they see higher quality analytics, right? This happens through standardized processes, more confidence because of your testing paradigms, the deployment patterns that you start following. All of this results in higher quality. You also get better collaboration between technical and business teams. If one persona can take off and put on another hat relatively easily, you're not only kind of sharing a similar language here, but you're also kind of bridging that gap, bringing context across the different personas. You see increased trust in your data products. Again, the deployment methodologies, the testing frameworks. And finally, once you wrap all these things together, you'll get a faster time to value for your analytics projects. And probably the most important thing here is this framework scales. It works for organizations of any size. You can apply it to a startup, you can apply it to a corporation. What it really comes down to is understanding where you are in that journey, and also being able to look forward and make a really informed decision about where you want to go next. So before we get into the panel, I wanted to highlight here, we have a white paper written by Tristan, and this was really the seminal paper that we pushed out that highlighted and really put a name to the ADLC and a framework around it. I highly encourage you after this to go download that and read it if you haven't already. It's a really great read, and there's lots of supplemental articles and blog posts that we put out afterwards to kind of enhance and expand on some of the ideas there. Now that we're here, I want to spend some time and kind of kick off our discussions. I think it's time to jump in if everyone's ready for that.
Let's go, Alex.
Good.
Awesome. All right, Srini, I'm going to start with you. How does your organization approach analytics today?
So right now, we have moved away from our traditional data warehousing technologies and tools to more of a more modern and agile centralized approach for analytics. So with an emphasis on collaboration, governance, and quality data sets. So what we did was, like, so we shifted our engineering mindset from a traditional data warehousing to we adopted more of a software engineering best practice and software engineering mindset. And then along the process, we are using agile methodologies and workflows which empower our teams to iterate and improve analytics rather than saying that, like, say, hey, these are the requirements, get it done. We are more iterative in the process right now, and we're continuously improving the data sets we are building and then the data we are providing to our analysts or our stakeholders itself. So while doing that, we also focus on our data governance so that we can we also want to decentralize some of the data governance definitions itself. As our central data governance team or security team defines the governance, we try to adopt those definitions into the data itself through cataloging, through lineage, and then build security on top of that while we are building the models within DBT itself. And the data quality is also an important aspect for us. So while we did in the past, for example, data quality, when we're doing the data quality, we used to do it after the fact. For example, when data transformation is done, then we build some data quality tests after the data is updated into the data set. With DBT, what we're trying to do is, like, say, we implement the DBT data quality checks within the pipeline itself, so that by the time the data is updated to the end user through whatever means, whether it's Tableau or through our databases, the data is already data quality checked and certified. The data is qualified and certified by the time the data is available for anybody to report on. That's one thing we do. And then we also, so the feedback loop is very important for us because we are a large company. We have multiple teams using our data. So we always have that 360 feedback loop when we need improvements or when we need to make updates to our definitions, whether it's attributes or slight definitions to our metrics. So that feedback loop is included into our analytics practice, where we update, we have this continuous update, and then we have this weekly releases which go through with that. So we have this continuous feedback going through. So overall, I think if you look at the ADLC process, which you just talked about, so that fits in pretty well, wherein we go through the process of getting the requirements, developing it, pushing it into production, make sure that all the quality tests are there, and then gathering feedback, and then implementing that feedback back into our data models and our pipelines itself. So that's what we do from an overall perspective. And our data consumption is mainly either it goes through Tableau for visualization and reporting purposes, but we also have other reporting formats within our ecosystem where people can consume our data. So overall, I mean, I think it's a mix. It's a balanced mix of control and also data quality and adoption, which we look at, like, so what is the best path forward for us? So, and in the same way, how do we manage the delivery of a product and also maintain the quality and the high standards that we expect when we certify those data sets. So I would say operational excellence is also part of that.
Srini, I'm curious, and this is really, all three of you could jump in here. You talked a lot about this being iterative, and obviously, Alex, before you were talking about the loopiness of the entire model. One of the things in DevOps, which obviously the ADLC borrows a lot from, is there's not actually a correct iteration speed. I mean, sometimes people want to deploy thousands of changes a day, and the appropriate iteration speed is you pick up a bug, you fix it, you ship it that same day. And sometimes it's a little bit long. Do you folks, does anyone measure how long it takes to go through this process, or do you have a sense of what does fast feel like, or how often do you release, or any of this kind of speed related stuff?
Yeah. So speed wise, I mean, see, I think we are a large company, right? So we have to maintain certain standards from a release perspective. So we release once a week, but we also do hot fixes if there's a bug somebody release, or we always say the change in definition, and then the change in the definition needs to be, sometimes we say, hey, we're changing definition, but the exec reportings on Monday should have the new definitions. So then we do some hot fixes, but the overall idea is that we want to make, so there's even this PR process and approval process is automated. We don't do anything. So somebody submits a PR, there's another engineer who reviews it and approves it. Then there is a functional leader who says, yes, this is the change I want to see. They approve it. That's it. Say every Tuesday morning, the process picks it up and delivers the change to production. And quality testing is also the same way. So I think we decided that we want to maintain that process. Initially, we did not have that, but over a period of time, as we had 9 Scrum teams working on things simultaneously, we want to maintain that structure so that we know what's going in, what changes are going in. We report on those changes, how long it's going to take, and then we also you're asking us about how we track our bugs or changes. So we also track about say how many bugs are going through a specific product, right? Yeah. So that we understand where we need to invest more time, where we don't need to invest more time. And we also we have a weekly review. We have a weekly ops review where we look at say, hey, specific domain has got more bugs in the past 3 months than other domains. So then we spend more time looking at that. So it's a regular SDLC process. The main change for us here is, as you said, the DevOps process is the main change for us, which happened to us than what we used to do in the past, and now using the modern data tools.
So Srini, I think you just maybe inadvertently did an excellent job of just walking through the ADLC and all the different components that come into play there. Because just hearing you talk, you're talking about testing, you're talking about deployment, and then ongoing monitoring, and then all those different components. So I think That was really interesting. Brian, I'm gonna kind of pivot over to you, kind of like this, a similar question. Do you have some, some specific examples that you care to share, or kind of like thematically about how you kind of like balance this rapid iteration with like maintaining data quality at the same time?
Yeah, I think we try to follow the same process we're holding our normal application teams to. And I think having a tool that creates that repeatable process and helps you sort of keep in the lane. I liken it very much to lane assist on a highway. Like DDT helps us move through that process. The speed at which you can release is based on your demonstrated ability to be excellent, right?
I like
Which means you don't break the system,
Yeah.
and you build tests. So if your system is well tested, you essentially end up in a case where your operational monitoring and your testing are the same thing. Like you can do things like chaos monkey and stuff like that in application space.
Yeah.
We're nowhere near that in our data maturity, but making sure you've got those tests in place allow teams to move much, much quicker. In reality, there's always different impacts to any application or any data that's put out there. I think that some of the decisions we make are around risk, right? Like we only release this a certain amount of times because of risk, or in some of our cases, impact to market. I think we try to make it so that we don't try to be perfect, right? We bring assets together, we make sure they're tested when we consume them, and we make sure we understand the contract. Sometimes we test those data assets as well, and then we blend them into higher and higher quality, higher impact assets that have more discipline around how they're
Excellent.
delivered.
I think both of you have actually touched on something kind of just tangentially here, and that's the personas. And so, Tristan, I'm going to kind of throw this one over to you. We've talked specifically about personas within the ADLC, and we just heard like two kind of examples about how all these kind of mesh together. The engineers, analysts, and decision makers. How do these roles interact? How do you envision them interact? How do they interact here? I mean, I suppose I could answer that as well. But how have you seen that evolve over time?
The conversation that everybody always wants to have is this like weird, oh, what should data engineers do, and what should data analysts do, and what should and I think that's like actually kind of a boring conversation, because okay, you probably got a role definition for your ladder, and fine, like everybody maybe does it a little bit differently, but it kind of doesn't matter from my perspective. The big thing that matters from my perspective is that there are three main jobs to be done in analytics, and one of them is like you build reusable things so that like many people can use them. The other one is that you actually use those things to draw interesting conclusions, and third is you like actually turn those conclusions into business decisions. You like do stuff, and so there's just like three discrete jobs to be done, and the important thing here is I think that all of those jobs to be done map to the ADLC, and that oftentimes one person will actually do multiple of those jobs to be done at a single point in the process. So like this is the thing that I think people get really stuck on, and that I sometimes our sales team gets frustrated at me because they bring me into customer conversations, and then I end up having arguments with people about why they're doing it wrong. And so that's but this is like one of the things that I feel very strongly about, is that like it's really important to empower large groups of people to do the entire ADLC on their own, or rather like give them minimal gates. Like don't say like, oh, well, this part is owned by the data engineering team and this part is owned by the analytics team, and this, because that is a great way to never freaking get anything done in your business. And so, probably everyone on this call has worn different ones of these hats throughout your career, and maybe you've taken them off and put them on at different points in a day. And so I think that's the important part. You create tooling to create that kind of flexibility so that people can be a little more integrative in the roles that they play.
Tristan, I think it's really, I think, Tristan, I just want to follow up on that real quick. I think what's critical is there's a mindset shift that needs to happen to work with data effectively with the volumes of data and the techniques and technologies we've got today. We find people falling into the data warehouse team will do this for me. They'll save it for me. Like somebody else is going to fix my data. Like I don't even think about it. I can change my schema at will, and someone else will pick up the pieces. What I like, what a tagline we would try to use is nobody is going to save you from your data, right? This is your data.
I love that.
You need to own it. You need to think about it as quality. You are responsible. No one else is going to save you from it. And by using the right tools and the right process, that makes that possible.
I feel like we need a little book of all your little sayings and little tidbits here. They're great. They're solid. Here at DBT, I kind of think of it, we call them fuzzy lines in between the roles, because the expectation is that you are kind of like putting on those different hats and working kind of like cross-functionally there. And I think that's it's a natural evolution of kind of analytics in general. So Brian, just kind of staying on you for just a little bit, as you kind of move from like, okay, here's a data warehouse team, here's a data engineering team, and it's kind of matured in that way, where have you seen the most progress in your organization? And conversely, where do you see the area of like maybe biggest improvement?
So I just want to be clear, we're a very big organization, lots of companies coming together through acquisition. So I think some places we're doing well, and some places we're still in transition, right? So I don't want everybody to feel comfortable that we're not like a bright beacon on the hill having everything perfect. And that's okay, right? Because trying to be perfect is a recipe for failure in this case. I think that for us, the places we're most successful is where we create that strong data ownership and identity. And then we provide the tooling and techniques for teams to start to apply the ALDC, right? And we've seen that with DBT. We've gone into teams where you had to put the data in S3, and Spark was the only way to do your stuff, and this team had to do it. And when we've brought in these tools and brought more people and given them the tools to work with the data, we've seen not only things move faster, but quality go up. We've seen engagement go up. And we've had some big successes in some of our teams around, the Mannheim teams bringing data in like so much faster, because you don't have to wait for a Scrum team to decompose and prioritize the story to make some progress. You don't have to be on a Scrum team to make some progress. You can be an analyst and find a bug in something that I wrote and fix it and do a pull request, right? And that's just something that I think a lot of our analysts and a lot of our data users have been frustrated because they used to have to just open a ticket and maybe they find out something or not, or maybe they know the person who's on that team. This has just added a little bit more of the visibility and the sort of flow through the tool and the flow through the lifecycle. You can see all of that. So it's really empowered more people to be engaged. But it is that ownership. Like you have to feel like it's your problem to fix.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that I was most excited about when I joined DBT was this concept that we had individuals outside the data team that were actually contributing to the internal project, and they were following these procedures, and they were invested enough to do that. And I think that is an amazing thing. But I suspect you've seen kind of the same thing as you continue to scale, and there's more people interacting with the system. There's it gets a little bit more chaotic. And I think, I might actually kind of pivot over to Srini here. As you think about that, what becomes really, really valuable in that component is the testing, right? And making sure that you have a correct deployment pipeline set up so that you can bring on all these other individuals. So, how do you actually approach that? And how do you approach the validation of your analytics products there?
Yeah. No, before I talk about data quality and testing itself, I just want to add on to what Brian said. So initially when we started off, like I think with the DBT journey itself, so we were on the same like say everybody can do everything kind of mindset, like so everybody can contribute. But as we grew as we grew as we bring in more and more data engineers to adopt DBT and more Scrum teams to adopt DBT, what we realized was that as we grow larger, we need to put in a process of like say who does what in the sense, right? Like who owns that enterprise definitions, right? So who owns a sales hierarchy or a regional hierarchy or a market segment hierarchy? Like, so we don't want different teams. Like, say there are close to, I don't know, 700-800 data engineers or analysts who need access to DBT. So we need to manage we need to manage a central repository of things so that they don't take EMEA and then call it Europe, right? So that like that, and it's not matched with anybody else. So what we did was, so we have the central data engineering team responsible for maintaining all those common dimensions and all the enterprise metrics as like say that there's one metric definition for any metric we want to measure, whether it's to be pipeline or bookings or new business or whatever it is, right? So now, once we did that, then the analysts have access to DBT as well. But when we're looking at the data engineering, the central data engineering team, they go through a strict DevOps process. Like something is tested, somebody needs to sign off, and then go into production. But the analytics team can take the same and data set, and if they want to build something out of it, they have access to DBT too, which they don't have to follow the same exact processes. It could be a single team sitting somewhere where it's like, hey, I need this, but I want to slightly customize this for a group in EMEA, a group in APAC, or a specific product in US. So they should be able to take that. They take that and then build models on top of that and push the data set for their reporting purposes. But after some time, they say, hey, yeah, like see this, we built this, but this could also be used by other sites in EMEA or other sites in APAC, or the overall product teams can use this. So then they can raise a request to the central team. A central team will not rebuild everything. Hey, this is what you built. Take a look at that, put it into this central code, and then move it through the process. So I feel like this is not something like a day one, yes, this is what we want to do. It took us almost a solid 1.5 years or so to say, hey, this is how we want to do it. This is how we scale, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a very good learning for us across the board, for our data platforms team, for our data engineering teams, for our analyst teams. So for us, it's a learning process. And every day is not a rosy day, but I think at the end of the day, right now we have that process in like so where we are humming along nicely. So that's
and Srini, one quick thing on that is that the important thing is those experiments, those things off to the side that become important to come back in. If they're in a consistent tool chain, you don't have to have a team rewrite it. They're not rewriting it in their
not rewriting it. We're just bringing it out.
You can just click it in and operationalize it. And so I think that's where we see that value.
Yeah,
exactly.
The good thing is they're already quality tested. You know, yes. Like people are using it, it's tested, or now let's move this to everybody else.
Yeah,
across the enterprise. Then we bring them. So that's pretty cool. And then from a data quality perspective, I touched about this in the initial part, where I said, like in the past, we do a data transformation, put it into the data warehouse, okay, then test like say whether this is right or wrong, right? But then like say everybody started reporting on top of it, and or somebody will come back and say, hey, this is not right or this is not wrong. So now what we do is like, so we have a data quality testing framework itself. So we look at it as two different quality tests. One is an engineering quality test. By default, we would say, hey, see if it's not null, there are primary keys or whatever it is, right? So the very basic ones. And then the second one is we also implement functional quality tests. Let's say I thought we have a very good metric or the attribute definition across Salesforce to say, hey, that is defined once every year. What will have, how are you going to measure across this next 12 months? So, and then we also make sure that all the past data is brought up to that current year specification. And then when we are building when we are building the data pipelines, so those the functional data quality checks are implemented. The code is already written. Somebody needs to just call the test and make sure that if they're bringing those fields in, the quality test in, and then we record. We have we have a warning, a soft fail, and a hard fail. So we're based on that, like, so we have Slack automations which go through to the teams, and then teams will check, and then they can also say, hey, this is a soft fail, approve this, let it flow through, or it's a hard fail, nope, let's not update the data, and then somebody takes a manual look at it. So how it helps us is two ways. One, the data could be stale for one day, but the data is right. The data could be stale for maybe 1 hour before. Like, so we have batch processing which runs daily and hourly as well for some instances. It is stale, but it's not wrong.
Yeah.
But we can take a look at it, fix it, and then redeploy. Or we say, hey, this is an issue, the source system itself. That let it flow through. We understand it's an issue with source system itself. Source system will be corrected the next day, and then in the next hour, and then then the next load will automatically pick up the change. So while doing that, we do these checks on every pipeline we build, and all these checks, we also have an operational rigor on top of it, where on a weekly basis, we actually look for 1 hour, like, say, what is happening within the systems, where is their data quality is failing, where are we getting warnings. We provide a lot of information back to our stakeholders or our business team, saying that, like, say, hey, like, so there's something happening in the source system where the data is not the same, right? So we provide a lot of feedback. It's an iterative loop, but we invest a lot in that data, on the data quality piece of it, and then dbt is making it easy for us to check the data before it gets loaded and making it available for everybody.
It's really interesting. You know, you talked a bit about just kind of, you have this testing process, data quality issues, and I think, you know, combining that with what we were talking about earlier about kind of like expanding the footprint, we'll say, of the analytics organization, allowing more and more people in. I think that also changes the definition of what, you know, you measure and what means success, right? And 5 years plus ago, it was project delivery. How much could you get out the door and how much could you get to the business, right? But now that you've opened it up and it's now multiple teams interacting with it, those kind of success metrics have to evolve as well. I'm actually curious, Brian, on your input on this, since you have at your organization, you have all the different components kind of coming together through the acquisitions and whatnot. Like, you know, how do you think about that? How do you think about measuring success in today's kind of like analytics practice?
I think in a large enterprise, success depends on, again, depends on the use case, depends on the group that's working with it. We in our data marketplace, where we bring all the data together for everybody to be able to consume and blend, we really measure success based on how much a data set is used to answer questions, right? If you build something and nobody uses it, they either couldn't find it or it didn't have value, right? Or and as things rot over time, like, you start to see those tailing numbers. If you're not keeping things up to date and people are getting a lot of errors, they're going to use something else or invent it themselves. So I think, you know, in the commons, we talk a lot about the value the data delivers, and the proxy for that is usually how many different users are using it and how many different products are using it in those cases. Those tend to be a lot of those data sets tend to be a little bit slower to change because they're more enterprise published data sets. Doesn't mean we can't make changes to them. It's just that there's a lot more focus on them being closer to the official truth. I think the way we measure success on the more distributed working with data is, am I able to do this now?
Yeah.
Like, how quickly can I get the quality answer and verify that it's quality, that it's trusted? And do I need, like, how can I do it without needing to hiring an engineering team that needs to stand up a EMR cluster and like, right? Like there's just some basics that I think maybe 10 years ago I would have, cringed. I think all of us would have, right? But by providing the right guardrails, the right structure, and the right tooling, we're able to do that. And it's really about speed there. At the top, I'd say it's more about the quality and the usage metrics that we see.
That's great. Please.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, so it reminds me in the past, like, say, if we want to set up something, like, say, hey, if you want to set up DBT, for example, 10, 12 years ago, like, say, hey, we need to order a box. Somebody is like, like, say, it takes 8 hours to install the operating system on it, and then you install something else, and you test, and then by the time we say, hey, we want to implement something, by the time we implement it, like 3.5, 4 months just to like get the box.
If you're lucky.
I don't know how many of you guys remember that, but yeah, it used to be that used to be the life, right? So it's
so it was very unapproachable for everybody, right?
Yeah, I remember having a tower. I remember having a tower under my desk that had Microsoft Access on it, and I was just like, that's my little baby right there.
Yeah.
So,
everybody has those spreadsheets or those databases carved off to the side, right? And we're starting. What's nice about this is having, that integrated data repository that we share data in our marketplace, and then these tools on top of it. We see less of that, needing to have data in, eliminating the land of 1,000 lakes, right?
Yeah, that's I mean, how far we've come in such a short time, but I think that's just emblematic of how these practices and how technology allows us to mature on these things. But so from now until the future, right? Like, Tristan, this might be a great question for you. What kind of changes do you anticipate in how organizations are going to approach analytic development in just the next few years? I'm not going to ask you to predict out 10 years, but like, I don't know, 2 or 3.
He can predict 10 years, I think.
Yeah,
I'll take that, and then I'll place a bet somewhere.
I don't know. We could talk about this forever, and I need to stay away from. This is a conversation about the ADLC. It's a conversation about workflows, not technologies.
Yeah.
And we could all go on about iceberg for a long time, and I think there's a lot to talk about there. But I think that's honestly more of a technology conversation. It's really fascinating, but maybe for another day. The 2 things that I think are really going to drive organizational change the most in workflow and everything are one, the thing that we were just talking about, honestly, like accessible technologies, and 2, AI. And there's maybe some Venn diagram overlap between those 2, but in the Teradata and the Hadoop eras, you had to be pretty technical to get data work done, and that's what introduced the ticket queues and the specialization of roles. And you were either in the like Excel world or you were in the big data world, and the Excel was very self-service but very unreliable, and big data was very theoretically reliable but not very self-service. So I really, and self-service has gotten bad rap because we've kind of failed to achieve it as an industry over the course of 20 plus years, and so people are a little cynical about it when you talk about self-service, but I think that's what we're like honestly converging to, is BLN, you were talking about, with the kind of centralization of the data availability, and Srini, you're talking about all the different humans that are on the Scrum teams that have increasingly good processes. Like, this tooling is getting better. We're not installing operating systems and working up from there, and internally we are making progress on this too. I don't want this to be about us. It's honestly not, but the visual editor that we announced at Coalesce this past year, like, same framework, same workflow, but like now accessible to a new group of human beings. And I think that we need to be on this collision course where the good stuff, the like real data technology is like increasingly in collision course with like the stuff that everybody can use and have access to. So that I think that's happening. And I don't know whether that's, you know, over the next 24 months or the next 5 years, but honestly, it doesn't matter because it's just that big of a deal that it just has to happen. The other one's AI. And I was just talking to a founder recently that they have been working on this problem for, I don't know, 12 to 24 months. They provide highly customizable, very small models to do the many different things that you have to do when you're debugging data pipelines. You know, you have to. There's so many different. If you break the human activity down, like identify a bug, figure out how to fix it, write the code, test the code, blah blah, blah, all these different things. They've broken this problem down into like lots and lots of little models, and then they get these really wonderful results. And so the idea that data pipelines could be self-healing in the next couple of years is like honest. That's a real thing. I also think that like, sorry, go for it.
No, I was agreeing. I absolutely agree with that. I think that's going to be game changing.
I mean, and Tristan, we're seeing that and chasing that really, really hard.
Is that right?
In not only in our data space and our application space, right? Like the way I like to describe it is that natural language doesn't make a difference which human language it is, and words and pictures is the way we're going to do things in the future, and we're going to be guided and facilitated by all of those little models running as agents saying, well, did you think about this? Yeah. Or there's this thing over here that maybe you're duplicating. Like if we look at the things we do every day, there's not an infinite number of questions to ask that solve the majority of the problems. And so I know agents is the hot word of the year, but we really are starting to see some of that come out. Really excited to see what comes in the data space.
The thing that's so interesting is that there's always this tension in data, which is to say that, you know, there's an individual human being and they have to make a decision. And the question is, do I use the central stuff or do I say, I don't trust that stuff, I've got to make it on my own? Yeah. And that there's a truth of that. Like maybe the central stuff is good, maybe it's not good, but there's also the perception of it, which is kind of a meme. And it's a little bit hard to reset. And what we really need is we need the central stuff to be so reliable that people keep coming back to it because it's a flywheel. Then they invest in it. And there's this ratio of like how much human effort is required to keep the centralized stuff good. Because if that ratio is off kilter, then it's just not going to be good enough. And so these types of capabilities are going to really change that ratio where like it requires less maintenance effort to like make the central stuff reliable, and it'll contribute to this like really positive flywheel.
Yeah, so I think it's timely for me specifically. I mean, as I was in Seattle, I'm in Seattle right now because we are brainstorming on how Salesforce Agentforce can help us, especially like say with our use cases. And one of the use cases we were brainstorming on yesterday was like say, hey, like so we're doing a lot of these things with dbt, all of the code is stored in Git. The one we were brainstorming was like say, how can our agent read all this and provide us feedback on like say, if there's a PR and then somebody like me approving it, how the agent would approve it based on like say the knowledge it has. And we are actually kicking off a POC on it. And then we had our one of our senior execs who leads that engineering processes. He was like super excited about that, and he was like, say, hey, like if you need any help, if you're stuck somewhere, let me know, I'm going to help you. But I think that's an exciting part right now. I think there's a lot of learning that needs to happen too. I think it's similar to DBT, right? So when it came in, as we grew, like say, we learned a lot. We provided a lot of feedback. We are in a much better shape right now, and we are bringing in more and more people. Similarly, like say, we're taking a very similar approach where we say, hey, how agents can help us, you know, for engineering productivity or analytics productivity in general. So that's what we spent 2.5 hours yesterday discussing how we can how agents can help streamline or even help us with all the approval processes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to that.
So if you think
It is
about
really
these three personas on the screen, you've got the data engineer, the analyst, and the decision maker, right? I think what's going to happen over the next year, 2 years, I'm always wrong on dates, so no one ever quote me or buy any stock on me, but I think what's going to happen is you're going to get assistance for the decision maker to be an even better engineer, right? And for the engineer to be an even better analyst. And you're going to get this support so that these hats are much more easily taken off and that taken on and off, and that it's easier to be repeatable, right? Like if you're a decision maker and you're looking at data, you need to make a decision. You're like, well, we've made this decision 15 times before, and here's the frameworks we've used for it. That knowledge locked away in people's heads is a cause of a huge amount of waste and a huge amount of suffering, right? And it happens whenever anybody retires or leaves the company, right? There goes all of the information that analyst had that helped us make decisions, or that engineer had, and all that context about that system and how it changes and how it ticks. So I think like thinking about all of this as data and thinking about agents and other processes helping us is going to be a real transformative thing we're going to see in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I like that framing of making it easier to take the hats off and changing those hats. And you know, as we're kind of looking, if I put back up the ADLC here, right? You know, it is important to note that it is a continuous flow, right? And you know, regardless of the next wave of technology, because there's always going to be technology, but it's going to be how you actually implement it, how you actually think about it in terms of your organization as an enabler, as opposed to, you know, oh, the next new shiny thing. Because if you're getting to testing, you may not 100% be ready for fully automated testing pipelines at that point in time. And so maybe solving your problems in a less intense way is the right way for you then. And then that makes maturity in your organization more local, right? So we've been talking about maturity in the for the entire industry, but like what really matters is where you're at in your journey and how you want to start navigating this kind of process here. I think I'm getting an indication that we are, this has been an awesome conversation, by the way, but we are pressing up against the time really hard here. So I do want to close this out and just throw a big thank you out to all three of you guys for coming on here, sharing these insights, sharing these kind of like thoughts and processes. And there's a lot here. I mean, I took a bunch of notes just to kind of follow up and ruminate on. So I have full faith that our listeners too have done the same thing. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome. And for everyone that joined, thank you. You know, really a lot of what we're about is, you know, sharing information, participating in the overall community and really engaging with the practitioners. So if you are really looking to get involved with the ADLC, to try out DBT, there should be a Goldcast button somewhere on your screen right now. And what that'll do is that will actually enable you to get it set up with a one-on demo, get some hands-on experience with DBT and get connected to us. And then also we would really and greatly appreciate your feedback on today's session. It really helps inform the type of content that you really enjoy and that you want to see more of. And I mean, I would love to get the three of you guys back together again and have another conversation at some point. And, you know, I am very much looking forward to it. So to everyone out there and you guys, thank you so much. Very much appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.